2024 Town of Rome Board Meeting to order. Roll call starting on my left, please.
Stevenson here.
Minter here.
Jumati here.
Cole here.
Gabriel here.
Certify the posting of the meeting, please.
I'll try. I certified that on Friday, September 27th, 2024, the agenda for the Town of Rome Board meeting for Thursday, October 3rd, 2024 was posted at the Rome Town Hall at 8:41 a.m., Quick Trip LLC at 8:49 a.m., Nakusa Port Edward State Bank at 8:55 a.m., and emailed to the Wisconsin Rapids Tribune at 9:08 a.m.
Okay. Need a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second with a requested change. Number 16 on the agenda. The minutes. Never mind, I'm one step ahead of myself.
That's okay.
Two steps, actually. All right, I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Supervisor Gabriel, second by Supervisor Cole to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Pledge of Allegiance. Item number 6, citizen comments. Did we receive any orange cards? No. But I will read 6A. The board will also take comment from the public on agenda items as called by the chair, reminding all that we do follow Robert's Rules of Order, but not during citizen comment. Please note that once the board begins their discussion on an agenda item, no further comment will be allowed from the public on that issue. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you. No action contemplated except possible referral to future agenda. Number 7, informational updates, meeting recaps, recent correspondence, current events, and announcements. And we'll allow our Madam Clerk to start first, and then we'll go down the line.
I would like to introduce everybody to our new administrative support assistant, Nikki Foley. She's also the deputy clerk. If you want to stand up.
Hi, Nikki. Welcome.
Welcome.
All right, and then I'll start. I have quite a few of them here, if you don't mind. The first one is the electronic recycling for Adams Columbia Electric Co-op. And if you've ever done this before, it's really good. So take advantage of it if you can. It's October 4th at their Friendship office on East Lake Street. All road construction is done. Electronic recycling will take place from 10 a.m. to 2. Members of the Adams Columbia Electric Co-op may bring up to 5 electronics per membership, including 1 TV or computer monitor. It's a drive-through event, so have your things in your vehicle where they can easily take it from your car and help you with it. So they'll take everything from cable boxes, cords, cameras, cell phones, game stations, satellite dishes. I don't think they mean the really big round ones, but servers, toasters, TVs. So it's on our webpage, the town's webpage. So I suggest you go there because all the other items are listed. The other items I have are for the Chili Fest, Quilt, Craft, Rummage, and Bake Sale at Woodland Lutheran Church. They'll be holding that on October 5th, and that's on 14th Avenue. And they'll have a bake sale from 9 to 3, horse cart rides, and chili is all you can eat from 11 to 3. There's a cost for adults and children. It's nominal, and children under 3 are free. I also have, Dan might want to do this one for the library.
Yeah, though.
Here, you got that? All right. I have an Italian fundraiser for the Adams County Humane Society. They're at their max for animals, like all shelters and rescues are right now. It's Saturday, October 12th from 4 to 6. They have basket raffles, grab bags, and a 50-50. It's $15 per person, but you get lasagna, salad, breadsticks, and homemade desserts, and takeout is available. And then they're also having their low-cost vaccination and microchip clinic on Saturday, October 19th from 2 to 4. So you can take your dogs and cats and have their shots, everything from rabies, distemper, and as well as get them microchipped. Then the last one I have is for the the Halloween party for the children. in the Rome Town Center. That's on October 26th, from the 1st to the 3rd. They'll have candy handout for children under 12, a petting zoo, balloon animals, a DJ, prizes for best costume, and again, a phone booth, which was really popular last year. So they invite everybody to come out for that spectacular event. So thank you, and we'll start with Supervisor Evenson on my left.
I have nothing.
Supervisor Minter?
So two things at the Lester Library here in Rome. First is the Friends of the Library used book sale started today and runs through Saturday during the hours that the library is open. So if you're looking to have some physical books in your presence, you can go check out the deals at the library. The Friends then use that for funding where they help out with other events at the library. And then the second thing at the library is on October 8th, there will be a Scarecrow construction event going on. Their theme this year is Storybook Scarecrow Contest. So if you're interested, you can register at the library to have your Scarecrow placed onto the Scarecrow Walk. And the Scarecrow Walk will take place from the 13th through, the 14th of October through the 3rd of November at the trails behind the library, and you'll be able to vote for your favorite Scarecrow.
And Supervisor Cole?
I don't have anything to add.
And Supervisor Gabriel?
I have nothing else to add.
Nothing? And I'll just take that back when you're done with this, so I can give it back to, thank you very much. All right, moving on then. Or I should ask, Administrator, Finance Director, Attorney, we're all, okay, thank you. Discussion and possible action on the following items. Number 8, discussion and possible action on the approval of September 19th, 2020 meeting minutes. You're up.
Let's see. We need a motion first, don't we?
Can't make a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes. With the change on number 16, the last paragraph, it currently reads motion by motion/Cole. It should be by Minter/Cole, just a typo. So we changed that.
Do we have a second
I'll second
with that correction?
with that correction.
Okay, so we have a motion by Supervisor Cole, a second by Supervisor Gabriel for approval of the September 19th, 2020 meeting minutes with the correction on one of the motions from the word motion to Minter, the name Minter. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion and possible action. Eller's presentation regarding borrowing options for roads. We'll introduce Greg Johnson from Eller's. He's been the town's financial advisor going on 17 years now, the company, so. Thank you for joining us this evening.
It's 19, but who's counting?
Is it 19?
Today is actually my 19th year anniversary at Ellers to the day, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, thanks.
So we're one of your originals.
Yes.
Congratulations. Let's just wait for him to get hooked up there and he'll.
Well, good evening. I'm here to talk about a couple of different financing scenarios for road improvement projects in 2025. So we were provided kind of 3 different dollar amounts by town staff to kind of look at developing financing options to kind of give you an idea of kind of the impact on the tax levy for the various levels of projects that are funded. So we'll go through each scenario. So option number 1 funds a little over 1.8 million of road improvement projects. We'll show the amortization and levy impact on that if that was financed over a 10-year period. Option number 2 finances a little over 3.7 million, and option number 3 funds almost 4.5 million. So kind of different levels of borrowing. Obviously, the more you borrow, that has a larger impact in terms of the debt service levy for the town. Before we look at the impact of these 3 borrowing options, it's always helpful to know where we're starting from in terms of the town's existing debt outstanding. So this chart just kind of projects the town's levy for debt service if you didn't borrow any other funds, just paid the debt that's already outstanding. So in the far left-hand column, this is the total principal and interest payments that are outstanding for existing general obligation debt. The town uses several non-levy revenue sources to repay some of that debt service. The largest portion comes from TID District Number 1, the Sand Valley area. And then there's some debt outstanding related to the water utilities, so water revenues repay that debt. And then the premium refers to past debt issues. When that debt was sold, the town received some excess funds, which by state law have to be deposited into the debt service fund to pay interest. So those funds are already available to help pay some of the interest on your existing debt. So your levy for debt service in the 2024 budget was approximately $573,000. We're projecting in 2025, if you didn't levy any other debt, your levy for debt service would be approximately $588,000. So slight uptick, but not considerable. So you see your existing levy for debt service in that net tax levy column shown here. Stays very stable for the next several years. And then we project what your tax rate is per thousand of market value. And so for a $300,000 home, it shows how much they are paying in taxes just for debt service annually. So in terms of the option one projects, here's kind of the detailed list that was provided by staff. So again, option one includes approximately $1,865,000. So you'll see the existing list of improvements. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can see that what was included in that option. So in terms of what that means to the property tax levy for debt service, we prepared this chart. So on the far left-hand side, that just shows your existing levy for debt service. That's what you already need to levy to repay your existing debt. That was from the chart I just summarized. And then we estimate principal and interest payments for the notes amortized over a 10-year period. This shows that you would finance the projects, in the early 2025. I mean, the timing can be dictated by the town. But what that would do to your levy for debt service for 2025, you'll be at approximately $588,000. If you borrowed, this level of project costs, you'd be at about $811,000 is where your debt service levy would increase to. So that's an increase of about $223,319. So if we use a $300,000 home as just kind of an example, that means the additional amount in 2026 that home would pay for debt service would be $45 a year. So that kind of puts that into just, some kind of context in terms of what the fiscal impact would be for financing, that level of projects in option one. So before I continue, the rest of these charts are very similar in terms of how they're formatted, just using different options, but just want to see if there's any questions thus far.
Oh, I have none. Anyone? Okay.
Can we ask a question?
Not during the presentation. If we could wait till it's over, please. Thank you.
So another item that we look at is what's called your general obligation borrowing capacity. So the majority of the town's debt is issued on what's called a general obligation basis. It's the most common form of debt that municipalities issue in Wisconsin. And legally, general obligation debt is backed by an irrepealable tax levy pledge. It's the most secure form of debt that the town can issue. Under state law, you can levy whatever is necessary to repay your existing debt outstanding. So it's viewed as a very secure investment for investors that would be buying any debt obligations of the town. But you're limited to the amount of general obligation debt you can have outstanding. And that limit is the principal outstanding cannot exceed more than 5% of the town's total market value, including your incremental value in your TID district. So let's use 2024 as an example. So at the end of this year, the town will have approximately $12.2 million of principal outstanding for general obligation debt. So you're at 16% of your debt limit. That means you have $64.2 million of borrowing capacity remaining. So legally, you could borrow $64.2 million on a general obligation basis. That's not what I'm recommending you do, but legally, you have the ability to do it. So the town is in a very good position from borrowing capacity. If you have further capital investment that you're looking to undertake, that's larger in nature, larger costs, you're looking to kind of spread that cost out, to kind of spread it out for existing taxpayers and future taxpayers. Legally, you have more than adequate borrowing capacity to undertake any of these options and still have remaining borrowing capacity for other capital projects that may come up. So option number 2, again, that was $3,735,000 of project costs. So some of the same projects that were included in option 1, but just some additional projects added to get to that overall total. So in terms of the impact for option number 2, same chart. So your debt service levy for 2025, again, is approximately $588,000. If you borrowed the 3.8 million, that would take the debt service levy up to about $1,034,000. That's a $446,300 increase in your debt service levy from 2025 to 2026. So using that same $300,000 home as just an illustration, that would increase the tax bill just for town debt service by $89 a year. So that kind of puts that into context, when you compare it to option number 1. So the borrowing capacity for option number 2 doesn't really materially change. Again, you've got plenty of borrowing capacity, so that's as much of a legal calculation as anything else, really not a concern. So option number 3, that kind of includes, the final option, which was the larger dollar amount. So you're looking at just shy of 4.5 million of project costs identified. So in terms of the tax impact there, again, from 2025 to 2026, you're looking at the debt service levy increasing by about $537,000 for that year-over-year change. So for a $300,000 home, that would mean another $107 per year for the year for the debt service for about 4.5 million of project costs. So kind of, as I mentioned in my opening comments, the more you borrow, kind of the larger the impact on the levy, but the more infrastructure projects you're investing in. So I mean, there's, one of the, clear distinctions with that is there's a direct correlation here. So I mean, when you're looking at those levy increases, it's directly tied to the road investment that you're funding with the proceeds from the debt offering. So, very clear what the levy increase is for. It's for road improvements. So borrowing capacity, even with option 3, the highest dollar amount, even by the end of 2025, you'd be at 18% of your limit and still have 68.6 million of borrowing capacity remaining. So again, really not an issue from a borrowing capacity standpoint. This is all about what the impact is on the tax levy and just the overall affordability. So just kind of a comparison of kind of each of the options kind of on a one-page slide. So we got the first bullet point identifies the total dollar amount that's being financed, the debt service levy increase from 2024 to 2025, what that levy increase just for that year adds annually for a home valued at $300,000, and then just shows the total principal and interest expense over 10 years for each of the options. So just kind of gives you a high level comparison of each of the options in terms of that fiscal impact. So really kind of next steps. I mean, this is really an informational presentation. If the town does decide it wants to proceed with issuing debt to finance some road improvement projects, the first step is that the town board would pass a resolution that authorizes the issuance of the notes. It can be approved, just requires a majority vote approval of the town board. And then we typically sell the notes a month later after the town board authorizes to proceed. The debt issuance process takes about a month to complete. We sell the notes, and then the results are presented back to the town board for a final award. So really, no official action being taken on this tonight in terms of adopting a resolution. Certainly if you have questions, I'll take those. If you have comments or want to discuss next steps, this kind of gives you kind of a preview of where we go from here. So that's my summary comments on the presentation.
Thank you, Greg. We'll allow the board to have their discussion and questions for Greg first, and then we can open it up to some questions. So does anybody have any questions or comments for Greg?
Not about the financing itself. If we had questions in regard to the roads that are listed and how long this will then protect us or carry us out so that we don't continue to do this every year, that rather we'll take care of the major roads that need replacing, and then we'll be able to maintain roads on our own budget. That's not a question for you, that's for our, public administrator. So that would be down the road that we would ask that type of question?
Public Works Director and our Administrative Finance Director, right, I think so too. Brad's not here tonight, I don't see him, or is he in his office? Okay. Cause I had questions too regarding some of that, and I think that has to be another meeting. But in order to get this in our budget and talk about it and get the actual, we're gonna have to do that sooner rather than later. And
Wouldn't that topic come up at when we do the road part of the budget? Because that's obviously if he's, whichever one is going in here, it's going to be written into the budget, proposals that we look at in these upcoming meetings.
this is coming
Correct,
down.
we just wanted the demonstration to be done so that you knew what the borrowing impacts
Okay.
were when you look at the roads next week.
I'm just sharing these as Jackie brought it up, and I've mentioned before too, and we've talked to Brad about it previously, is getting on an eventual cycle and what's recommended. Granted, this is about a year and a half dated now, but from the Towns Association, at one point in time, we were on this cycle of maintaining roads. So if we borrow and fix the number of roads that's on this list that's being presented to us, and after we discuss that with Brad, we really need to start looking at getting back on a regular cycle of regular maintenance. So that's all this represents. That's from the Towns Association. Jason, I've got one for you, and if you guys wanna share it, but, Greg, the question, I had a couple of questions, unless somebody else would like to go first? Nobody else? Greg, the questions I had for you is, there's no prepayment penalties on paying these back, is there?
So typically, when 10-year notes are sold in the securities market, there is a call feature, but it's typically 6 to 7 years out. So it's not prepayable annually, but there is a prepayment option. So
At
what
the call time?
At the call date, so typically in about 7 years. And so what that allows you to do in that 7th year is that if you've built up some extra cash, you wanna pay down some of the debt, you can do that. If interest rates are more favorable at the time, you could refinance. If neither of those conditions are present, you don't have to do anything. It's an optional call feature.
Right, and that's where I was after, is more so the refinancing, which we've done in the past too, when rates were going down, we could refinance at a lower interest rate.
correct.
And do you see that the market is favorable if we do this soon, like it was the last time we did this in June?
Yeah, so I'm sure many of you are aware that, recently, and a few weeks back, the Federal Open Market Committee lowered the federal funds rate for the first time in several years. I think people, when they hear that, they think, well, is there gonna be an immediate,
Right.
noticeable drop in interest rates in terms of how the municipal bond market reacts? It's really not that instantaneous. Usually the Fed action is fairly well anticipated, and so in the months kind of leading up to that Fed action a couple weeks ago, we were really starting to see a gradual decline in interest rates, and really interest rates remain very, very stable. So we've seen a gradual decline over the last couple of months, and really things have been very stable for the past several months. I mean, it's, our interest rates where they were at 3-4 years ago? No. But, they were at historical lows 3-4 years ago. So, I mean, if you're borrowing money for, 10 years, you're gonna be paying, well under 4%. So, I mean, it's, interest rates are still favorable. I think everyone, when they hear rates have gone up, well, where have they gone up from? I mean, if you go back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the rates we have now would be very attractive. So, yeah, we're still in a very favorable interest rate environment.
So my next question would be then, do you think you can't predict it, but do you think we'd be in that same position that when we go out to sell these and Quarles and Brady's comes in and works with us on that, there's a potential to have enough credit due to our ratings and our rating and our standard that there'd be enough to make those interest payments for the first year and a half like we've had in the past?
Yeah, I mean, we would update this, same analysis before you kind of go into market. So I put this together with, if you did go forward, thinking the earliest you would likely do something is probably, the first quarter of next year.
Like last, okay.
So, we can move ahead whenever you decide that's appropriate. So we would update this same analysis and kind of look at where market conditions are at that time. I mean, interest rates in the municipal bond market literally change daily. So we'd take a fresh look at that. I mean, the rates I've used in this analysis are higher than what we're seeing presently in the market today. So I've already built in some cushion, even if rates went up.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Alrighty, does staff have any questions well, staff, and then we'll go to the public, general public. Yes, ma'am, if you want, who raised their hand first? Did you, in the t-shirt? Yes, go ahead.
I was just
Well,
wondering-
please come up, give your name and address, and ask the question. And again, this is a town board meeting, so we do have to, you can have, 2 minutes on this portion to speak.
What's going on? Peggy,
Nothing-
Peggy Heyer, 348 Huntington Court. I just wanted to know, how much money do we have, because I didn't download those forms. How much money do we have right now with that the town could use without having to borrow? Do we have to borrow?
We do if we wanna do this road work, because the money that we get every year is from the state, and it's general transportation aids, and it's usually between 325 and 350, and we don't know how much we'll get per mile this year. Greg could probably answer that better, unless, you happen to know. We don't have those figures yet and we won't get those for a couple of weeks yet. Maybe Greg could piggyback on that, but I think I covered it. General transportation aids come from the state, and they're very limited. And we're lucky if that covers our maintenance costs, like, salt, snow removal, help me, shoulder filling, those potholes, mastic, that buys mastic prices are going up because of oil and everything else.
Right. I was just wondering, how much, because there's more people coming out here because of Sand Valley, how much are they all in and paying their taxes? Or, because I had heard that the board had issued another 2-year extension to them. To
First, I'll answer your question. That's incorrect. We did not issue an extension.
good.
The TID is as it always was, and part of the developers agreement. I can even have maybe Greg elaborate on that. And they pay their taxes on their residents, some of the buildings out there, on the Lido. So there's a lot of taxes already coming in from Sand Valley, but that's off topic this evening, what they do.
Well, I just wanted to know, because
Yeah.
it could help towards our budget.
But
No,
they
I
pay
mean-
taxes like you and I do.
Okay.
They pay taxes just like you and I do.
Well, that's gotta be coming into the town,
Correct.
Some of
On
that.
their property taxes, absolutely.
right? So I just thought maybe that would increase our, how much we have.
No, because our general transportation aids come from the state. They pay their property taxes, and our budget is like it is for everybody else. Our budget is our budget. So when their property taxes come in, just like yours and mine or anybody else's here, it goes into a pot that we have to pay for the services and everything that we provide.
So we're
But
just
if-
working off of those, that the state gives us some money.
In the past, we have added money to it, but we're not in a position to do that right now.
I wasn't up to speed on that. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Robbie, did you want to add anything?
No, again, we're reviewing our budget, we'll get through it.
Yeah. Just gotta get up to speed.
And the reason for the limit is there's a lot of people here again tonight, and that portion of our agenda, as I said at the last meeting, we can limit the amount of time, and I appreciate the questions, though. We want you to be involved. So thank you for coming this evening. Greg, did you want to elaborate? I see your hand. Please Greg, did you have anything you wanted to add on how I referenced the TID?
That's a good summary. I mean, your operating budget for public works, you have some property tax dollars, your state road aids going for your kind of routine road maintenance. This is really looking at investment in infrastructure that's kind of beyond all those items that you mentioned.
Exactly. This is infrastructure now that's been let go for quite some time, and we're playing catch-up, so we have no choice but to bond to get caught up again. So that's why we have to bond. But yes, I see your hand up in the blue shirt, please. Name and address, please.
Yep, Lisa LaRock Williams, 1186 Fairway Trail. I guess my question is for you.
Please address the board,
No? Oh,
and then we can,
okay, sorry. When you discuss about refinancing when lower interest rates and everything come in, my question is it the same as what I'm accustomed to if you refinance your mortgage? All that interest you paid for those couple of years is kind of nil and void, and then you start all over with the process, right? So, is refinancing really one of the better options if the initial 2 years of payments, if interest comes down, is kind of nil and void?
So I'll use one of these charts as kind of an example. So you have principal and interest payments that you're making, and so on a 10-year note issue, it would be callable, typically in about 7 years. So you'll have paid off the principal and interest for those first 6 years. And when you refinance, if you're refinancing for savings and you have 3 years left, you would just be refinancing the principal and still paying it off over 3 years, likely at a lower interest rate. That's typically why most communities refinance their debt, is to save money. If for some reason you wanted to refinance those final 3 years of payments and extend it out another 5 years, you can do that as well, but you're going to incur more interest costs. So you have either option. So the first option is you're going to refinance. You're still likely you're going to pay it off in 10 years. You're just going to lower your interest payments. Or you can, what we call restructure, where you, for some reason, if the payments those next 3 years were causing you budgetary problems, you could extend it out a couple of years. But you're not required to do either. If the interest rates that you have are in 7 years are better than current interest rates in the market, you do nothing and just pay that same interest rate that when the debt was sold 7 years earlier. So
And a call date is just simply being able to react to the situation at that time. We might do
Yes.
something, we may not do something.
It's
correct?
called optional because it's
Right.
entirely at the town's discretion if you take advantage of it, or a lot of debt that was sold 3-4 years ago and interest rates are very at historic lows. They had call features just to give you the option to make a prepayment, but the likelihood you're going to refinance debt that's at 2% is slim and none.
Thank you, Greg. Any other questions? Did you have one, ma'am, or, okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Board, do you have any more discussion or questions on this portion of the agenda? No. Okay, thank you very much. All right, then we'll move on to number 10. Eller's presentation on the TIF status, and the financial planning for eventual closure.
Before I go into kind of the performance of TID District Number 1, I'll just kind of give a background on what a tax incremental finance district is. So a TIF district is really an economic development tool to help promote an increase in the tax base over time. So when a TIF district is created, it has a geographical boundary. One of the criteria in state statutes for a TIF district is that boundary has to be contiguous. The parcels have to be connected. You can't leapfrog from one side of town to the other and have those properties on either end be in the same TIF district unless they're connected by parcels in between. So when a TIF district is created, all of the property value within that district had a taxable value when the district was created. That's called the base value. So all the taxing jurisdictions, the town, the school district, the county, the technical college, you've all continued to collect taxes on that value that existed at the time the TID district was created. You get the same tax revenue you did before. The financial benefit of a TIF district for the town is that by creating that TIF district, as that value increases, so the base value, say when the TID was created, you had a base value of $1 million, and then over time that $1 million increases to $10 million. The difference between that is $9 million. That's the incremental value, the increase in value. The town retains all of the taxes collected on that $9 million of value. The town share, the school district share, the county share, technical college share, and uses it to repay expenses that were incurred in the TIF district to help bring that development to fruition. So what a TIF district is really a partnership between the town and the other taxing jurisdictions to promote economic development. Because all those other taxing jurisdictions had to approve the creation of the TIF district. You just don't do this without their consent. They had to approve it. Because what they're doing is they're agreeing to forego their share of tax revenue while that TID district is open to help pay for expenses, to hopefully increase the value of the property within the TIF district. Then when the TID district has repaid all of its costs, it closes and all that increase in value returns to the tax rolls. And that benefits the town, the county, the school district, and the technical college. Because if you have a very large TIF district with a lot of incremental value, that's a lot of value that returns to the tax rolls at once, which can really provide some, property tax rate decreases. So it's really an economic development tool tied to a specific geographic area, and you use the tax revenue just from the increase in value to pay for expenses within the district. So before I go through the town's TID, any questions on that?
Anybody on the board? Okay.
So let's.
Anybody here have a question, just quickly, or Diana in the back, please? Yes, please, name and address.
Diana Dilge, 1308 Birdie Trail. My question is, why would one of the taxing entities not support a resolution with regard to the new TID, and all the other ones would?
You mean if that happened?
Yes. Well, right, like, while it's going on right now. A vote on the resolution approving the TID for this year. And one of the taxing everybody, mid-states, the county, the town, they all agreed to adopt the resolution except for the school district of Nakusa.
She agreed.
No, I thought she said,
Oh, Greg can answer the question, I guess. Greg, did you hear something different than us? Did Lynn say no?
Well, the first thing I want to clarify is once a TID district is created and it's open, the joint review board itself, which consists of the town, the technical college, school district, all the taxing jurisdictions, and the public member, they can't vote to close a TID district once it's created. It stays open until either the TID district reaches the end of its maximum life and it's required to close, or it's generated enough revenue to pay off its expenses early. So the joint review board's required to meet annually to review the performance status of the TIF district. They typically pass a resolution that just acknowledges that they met and satisfied the annual meeting requirement. They can't make a vote to close the TID district. Once it's created, it stays open until it's statutorily required to close.
If someone did vote no, but I'm almost certain she said she agreed with, it was unanimous, but if someone did vote no, what kind of impact does that cause anything?
The only resolution they're acting on at the annual meeting is a resolution that acknowledges that you met to satisfy the requirement that the joint review board meet annually. I mean, they could vote no, but it just.
It doesn't impact anything?
No, just.
Because they're still part of it, correct?
Correct, that's correct. They can't opt out.
Yes.
I think what happened was you had asked who would approve it, and everybody said aye, and then you said against or something to that, and then Lynn said aye, but I think she meant to have it on the prior resolution.
It was a delay.
It was a
because-
delay. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. It happens. It was a misunderstanding on my part. I sometimes forget that there's people on there joining us and then I don't always hear what they say, and then she was delayed.
Okay,
And
so
that
it's
we've
my
had delays before.
misunderstanding of how things
No
were going down.
problem.
Never mind.
No problem, but thank you. It's a good point, though. I mean, what would happen if somebody, but it doesn't mean anything. They're still part of us, so.
That's correct.
All right. Did you want to continue then?
I will continue. If there's no
Okay.
other questions and just kind of the basics of TIF, we'll get into the town's existing TIF district. The existing TIF district, which kind of encompasses the main golf courses at Sand Valley and the lodge and clubhouse, was created back in 2015. It was created under the town TIF statutes. There are TIF statutes related to towns, and then there are TIF statutes related to cities and villages. Towns can create TID districts under the same statutory authority as cities or villages if they meet three criteria. There's a population criteria, which the town meets. They have to have an equalized value of a certain amount, which the town meets. But the third criteria is that the area within the proposed TIF district has to be serviced by sanitary sewer. That requirement the town did not meet at the time that Sand Valley TID was created. So the TID wasn't created under city-village statutes, it was created under the town TID statutes, which are a little more restrictive. So under the town TID statutes, there are only certain industry classification codes that allow you to create a TIF district for that type of development. One of the industry classification codes is tourism, and then under that tourism category, they list specific types of tourism activities that can be incorporated into a TIF district. One of those happened to be a public golf course. So that's why Sand Valley qualified to create and the town could create a TIF district for Sand Valley under the town TID statutes. But I just want to kind of make that distinction that there is differences between the town TID statutes and the city or village TID statutes. So the expenditure period for this TID district ended back in 2020. What that means is the town cannot undertake any new capital investment in this district. The town's continuing to repay debt service, and you incur some annual costs for audits, some staff time, things of that nature. You can charge those expenses to the TIF district, but there's nothing new you can undertake. That's a statutory requirement.
May I just ask you a quick question so people understand? Because when you say us undertaking more debt, that means us permitting the developer to allow more development within.
More development can occur within the TIF district. The town just can't issue debt to support that or offer the developer tax increment to help support that investment. The development can keep going as long
Right,
as the
and it
district
has.
and it has, as long as the district remains open. It's
Okay.
just, there's really no opportunity for the town to commit to any new investment in that district.
And that ended in 2020.
That is correct, and that was a statutory date.
Thank you.
So when this TID district was created, and in my overview, I mentioned the base value, that's the amount of taxable value that was there at the time the TID district was created. For this TID, that was $1,249,400. So the town, county, school district, technical college, you've all continued to collect your share of taxes on that $1,249,000 of value. Now, since the TID district was created in 2015, the amount of value that is increased above that base value is $130,205,200. So that's how much increase in tax base has occurred since 2015. So I'm going to walk through a cash flow model, and we're projecting that the district will be in position to close by 2029, and I'll elaborate more on that in a moment.
Can you just answer a quick question on that? When it's, somebody had suggested that we had extended it, it was not extended, it was always set to close in 2032.
Correct.
You'll cover this
I'll
soon.
cover that.
Okay,
The
thank
TID
you.
can remain open until 2032.
That was the max set.
That was the max. So I'll talk about kind of the
Great, thank
performance
you.
of it in a moment. So one item I'm going to get into here, which is a little technical, and I apologize for that, but it is what it is annually the Department of Revenue, so every year by June, the town's assessor submits their report to the Department of Revenue for all taxable property within the town, including the TID district, that's assessed values. And then the Department of Revenue converts those assessed values to equalized or market values, because all valuations in TIF districts are on an equalized or market value basis. The tax rate is based on a market value basis. So every year, the Department of Revenue publishes a report for every TIF district in the state that shows how much that incremental value increased. So, for this past year, the value increased $48.9 million. It's a substantial increase in value. However, what I want to draw your attention to is this line that talks about a prior year correction of $14.8 million. It's not unusual to see prior year corrections. There's many reasons why there are corrections that get processed the year after. I'm going to give just one example because I think it's the easiest to explain. So I mentioned that the assessor submits reports in June, and perhaps you may and those values get certified by the DOR in August. Let's just say you had a board of review that occurred in September that changed those values that were submitted to the assessor back in June and got certified for the TID in August. That's not going to get, once the incremental values are certified by the DOR in August, they're fixed, they're locked. But if you make changes after that point, the next year they may make corrections to account for that. So the prior year correction for this TID was a little over 14.8 million in value. I see prior year corrections often for TID districts. I don't recall ever seeing a prior year correction this large. I'm not purporting what the reason was. I'm not the assessor, so I'm not going to speculate, but that's a large amount. So what that generally tells me is that last year's incremental value was underreported, so the increment that you collected was less based, not taking this correction into account. So this year they're adding 14.8 million back, so your increment collection will be higher in 2025, and then all else being equal, they'll back that 14.8 million out next year to kind of neutralize that 2-year correction process.
Okay.
There could be other increases in value in the TID based on new construction this year that may wipe out some of that prior year correction. But I'm factoring this into the model just because that number is so large. A 14.8 million correction is significant. So apologize that I'm kind of getting into the weeds, but I about fell over when I saw that number. That's a large number. So let me kind of get into the performance of the TIF district. So as I mentioned, the TID was created in 2015, and so every year the Department of Revenue says how much has that value increased over the prior year. So in this actual column, we show all those increases in value. So there's that $48.9 million number that came directly from that previous page from the Department of Revenue. I'm backing out 14.8 million next year to kind of account for that correction. Now there may be other development that occurred in the district that could wipe some of that out. We'll see what happens a year from now. I mean, candidly, when I see a correction that high, I don't want to start predicting too much, too far out. Let's kind of see what happens a year from now. But for now, I'm just showing 14.8 million of value coming back off to be conservative. So this chart kind of projects the tax increment. That's the amount of revenue that the TID district collects each year. So in 2024, for example, the TID district collected $1,248,452. I'm projecting next year that's going to jump up to a little over 1.9 million, and then with that correction, it may drop back down to a little over 1.6 million. So again, this TID district can collect increment until 2032, but as I'm going to talk about next, we're projecting that the TID district will generate enough revenue that it can close early. So I'm going to walk through this cash flow projection, which kind of summarizes the historical and projected performance of the TIF district. So kind of working our way across from left to right, you've got the tax increment. That's the increase taxes you're collecting on the increase in value. That's the main revenue source to the TIF district. The town borrowed money to make investments in the TID district back in 2016 and 2017. Then in 2020, the debt that was issued in 2016 was refinanced to a lower interest rate to lower the debt service costs. And then when the district was created, there was a development agreement that's still in effect that was executed with Sand Valley, and one of the provisions in that development agreement was that if the tax increment collected by the TIF district was not sufficient to cover the debt service, the principal and interest payments for debt that the town issued for the some investment in Sand Valley would be required to write a check to the town for the difference. From 2017 through 2020, that's exactly what happened. Every year we did a calculation, said the increment's going to be short, this is how much, sent that amount to Sand Valley, they wrote a check, sent it to the town, right in compliance with the development agreement. So over those several years, they had paid to the town $1,379,697 to cover those shortfall payments. By 2021, the amount of tax increment we were generating was in excess of the debt service payment, so Sand Valley was not required to make those shortfall payments. So the main expenses in the TIF district are debt service. So I mentioned in 2016, the town issued debt of about $12 million to fund an incentive to Sand Valley. In 2017, there were some improvements funded to Archer Road and some other costs related to the TID district. Then in 2020, the 2016 loan was refinanced to lower the interest expense. And then there's been some other modest costs charged to the TID district other than the expenditure of the debt proceeds. One of the other provisions of the development agreement was that if the tax increment did start exceeding the debt service payments, Sand Valley could get reimbursed for those shortfall payments, not with any interest, just the principal amount that they repaid. So in 2021, the town started reimbursing those payments back to Sand Valley. By next year, 2025, the town will make the final payment back to Sand Valley. They'll get reimbursed that $1,379,697 that they repaid. And then the only remaining expenses of this TID district are primarily just paying off the debt and some of the annual costs that the town charges to the TIF district. So by, these final columns are the balances columns. So the annual column just shows the annual difference between revenue and expenses for each year. The fund balance starts to build up. So what this cumulative column shows by 2029, there'll be enough fund balance left over to pay off the 2020 debt outstanding. One item I want to mention to the town, because we'll want to work with you to get this executed, is by next year in 2025, on April 1st, you should be able to pay off the debt that was issued in 2017 and paid off early with cash. So the town board will need to adopt a resolution to do that. So we'll want to do that early next year. And then you can use TID cash to pay off that debt early, so saves interest expense.
And what you're referring to is that loan that we took for the road improvement on
Correct.
Archer.
Correct.
That's separate from the, okay,
That's correct. So you'll be able to pay that off next year.
excellent.
And then by 2029, I'm projecting you'll be able to pay off the loan from 2020. And then, projecting that there would be, about $400,000 remaining in the TID fund. When a TID district generates enough revenue to pay off its costs, your expenditure period has ended, so you can't incur new costs. You're statutorily required to close the district early. So that would be 2029. We update this forecast annually. It's moved a little bit the last couple of years, but I mean, the fact that it's closing early, in my opinion, is a significant accomplishment. I made these comments at the Joint Review Board meeting earlier today. I was here when we set up this TIF district and when that was set up, and we created the TID district. We were very clear and made representations to the town and all the people in attendance that there was no expectation that the increase in value in Sand Valley was going to be sufficient to pay off all of the debt, and that the town would need to rely on Sand Valley to make those annual payments going forward over the life of the TIF district. Fast forward a couple years later, by 2021, the shortfall payments had ended. Move ahead a couple years past 2021, now we're in a position where this TID district is going to close several years early, which was never anticipated. So this is largely overperformed in terms of the increase in value and the ability to pay off the obligations and return all that value to the tax roll sooner. So it's, the TIF is very healthy. The TIF district has worked as it intended. Sand Valley made their shortfall payments, so the town would never have to rely on any general town tax dollars to support any of the debt for Sand Valley. Their increase in tax revenues covered it, or their shortfall payments covered it, and the district is very healthy and strong. So that's kind of where we stand today. We update these cash flows annually as new incremental values get certified each August. But for the past couple of years, we're projecting it's going to close early. So I'm, absent something unusual happening, which would be a large drop in value in the TID district for some reason, the TID is very healthy and strong.
Okay. Would you say it's one of the most successful tourism TIDs for a town of our size that you've
Yes,
experienced with the communities that
definitely
you're involved in?
Yeah, definitely for a community of your size. I mean, there's not a lot of TIDs created under the original town TID statutes because it's so restrictive. I mean, it's those industry classification codes are a lot of them are tied to kind of agricultural type projects and things. I mean, it's very specific things. I mean, it was, somewhat ironic that a public golf course was one of those allowed purposes under the tourism category. So yeah, it's for a town TID in particular, it's very successful.
So you would say with those shortfall payments, that was a smart move in our developers agreement and working hand in hand with the developer to make this happen.
Yeah, the town had several security provisions put in place. So it wasn't just the shortfall payments. That was kind of the first option. And to Sand Valley's credit, there was, they honored it. There was never any problem. I mean, we'd literally send them the town would send them my calculation. They would write out a check. I mean, they deserve credit for that. They owned up to their commitment. And again, this never happened, if for some reason they didn't make that shortfall payment, for several years when the TID first was created, there was a letter of credit outstanding, which is essentially the developer's money that's pledged to the town, that if they didn't make the shortfall payment, the town would have drawn on the letter of credit and gotten the money, received the money that way. There was also a period of time where the town had a first priority mortgage on the primary golf course and clubhouse development at Sand Valley. So you had some mortgage lien protection as well. So there were kind of tiers of protection, but the first one was always the shortfall, and that worked as intended. And Sand Valley deserves credit for that. I mean, they honored that commitment without any question.
My last question would just be then on, when you say the town repays, so there's a complete understanding, because where that money actually comes from and why we're repaying them those shortfall
Yeah,
payments.
it comes from all the tax revenue within the TIF district, so that increase.
The incremental.
The increase in taxes, so it's, again, it's the town, county, school district, technical college, all their share of taxes for TIF, for the TIF district go into this fund. So again, in 2024, that was $1,248,000. That's everyone's tax revenue on that increase in value. That's the revenue that was used to repay them. So it's tax revenue that was generated from Sand Valley's development itself. That didn't come from the town general fund or the general funds of any of the
Tax
other
levy.
taxing jurisdictions. No, there's been no tax levy support for this TIF district since it was created. That's why the development agreement was set up the way it was to make sure that never happened, and it hasn't.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I guess it's a fairly often repeated rumor question in the town of Rome that Sand Valley pays no taxes. How
Yeah.
would you answer that question for people that make that statement?
Whether you are in a TIF district or outside of a TIF district, there is no difference in the tax revenue you pay. Your tax rate is exactly the same, whether you're in a TIF or outside of a TIF. The only difference is where that tax revenue goes. So again, the portion of the base value of the TIF district, that roughly $1.2 million that was already there, the towns and all the other taxing jurisdictions continue to collect their share of tax revenue just like they did before. The increase in value that Sand Valley pays, they're paying taxes on the full amount of value that they have out there. But that increase in value that they pay goes into the TIF district to help pay for some of the investment to make that development materialize and kind of accelerate the development out there. Once the TID district closes, then that increase in value will get distributed, and the taxes from it will go to all the taxing jurisdictions. So, if someone says you're in a TIF district, you pay a different tax rate, that violates the uniformity clause of the state constitution, not legal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The question, or the comment I'd like to make too, is there's been a question too about the Lido. The Lido is outside of the TID,
Correct.
correct?
Yes, so as that development has increased in value, the town and all the other taxing jurisdictions have already benefited from that increase in tax value from any development that occurred outside the TID district.
And there are homes in certain portions of the Sand Valley development that do pay taxes, property taxes at the same rate everybody else does.
They all pay property taxes as the same rate as everybody else. Again, the difference is where the tax revenue goes. Everyone's paying the same tax rate.
Versus it comes to us or it goes back into,
The TIF fund, yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Staff, do you have any questions? No? Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Could you please come up to the front so people at home can hear you?
Okay. I'm not really familiar with Sand Valley. Is the Lido, is that a housing subdivision?
It's another golf course that they had developed on the other side of Archer Avenue that
Oh.
is not part of the TID.
Okay. So everybody's paying the same taxes. I'm glad we got that cleared up. But this Lido is outside of this,
It's not part of that.
okay.
There's some people that have misrepresented it as being part of the TID, and it's not. It's a completely separate development. It just happens to be the same developers, so they are paying taxes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
And it's a development that the town did not participate in any aspect of the development of the Lido. Sand
That's
Valley
absolutely
did it all.
correct. That's absolutely correct. So the homes that are being built there are paying taxes, their members support it, and that is on our tax rolls. Anyone else? Anybody else? Okay, and then Greg, do you have some ideas or some suggestions for us? We've talked about this a couple of times. Robbie and I reached out to you, just some ideas for us to, what you would suggest to start financial planning or forecasting for its eventual closure, because people are like hanging on us getting all of this money, and it doesn't mean that we're gonna get all that money every year after this closes.
Correct. So I'll talk through kind of, things to think about for a TID closure. So, right now, and this could change, the TID is projected to close in 2029, which means that the incremental value would return to the tax rolls and impact the 2030 budget, so the year following closure. Again, that's a projection. It could change. It could extend out. It could move up sooner. Well, we update these things every year, but that's where it stands today. So that's what happens when the TID district closes. Under the current levy limit law, under state statutes, when a TID district closes, you get a one-time allowable increase in your allowable levy. All communities in Wisconsin have been subject to levy limits since 2005. So that year following the TID closure, you can increase your allowable levy to fund your budget. That'll be by a defined percentage. That'll be determined at the time the TID closes. You get one opportunity to use that, and our current example of the TID closing in 2029, that would be for the 2030 budget. But then all that incremental value returns to the tax rolls. And so just given the large incremental value that's there for Sand Valley, that's going to be a meaningful event for the town and the school district and the county and the technical college. That's gonna be a lot of value going on to the tax rolls at once.
At one time, and then after that, it goes, they get
It
taxed on
stays
the
there.
normal
Yeah, it stays,
value.
yeah, it stays there. I mean, it may increase, but I mean, you're going to see a large influx in value.
In that 1 year.
Yeah, right now projected to be 2030, but that could change.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Anybody? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item number 10, or 11, excuse me, thank you. Discussion and possible action, Eller's analysis of Visit Rome's borrowing request for the Link the Lakes project. So, do you have information to share with us, or staff, if you can elaborate? Greg,
So at the last meeting, you had requested.
maybe you should go up too, so people at home can hear you, just in case, Robbie.
So at the last meeting, you had requested I reach out to Greg to find out what our options would be to support the funding for the Links of Lakes project. When I did reach out to Greg, he had stated that it would be in our best interest to have the town take on the loan rather than be a co-signer to the loan with the Visit Rome. And he can
Okay.
explain it further.
All right. Maybe you can tell us why. and-
Sure, thanks, Robbie. So, and I kind of shared these comments in email with Robbie, but let me just kind of explain. So a lot of this has to do with levy limits and geo debt that I was talking about earlier. So I had mentioned that any general obligation debt that the town issues is exempt from levy limits, which means you can increase your property tax levy by whatever amount is necessary to repay your debt. So, the kind of the two options that Robbie explained, one was if you finance, if the Visit Rome finances the project, the town would be a co-signer. And so my comment was, and I'm not purporting this is going to happen, it's part of my job to kind of look out for worst case scenarios for the town. If for some reason the revenues that were pledged to repay that loan did not materialize, and the town as a co-signer had to step in and make a principal or interest payment on that loan, If you're a co-signer and weren't the issuer of the debt obligation, it's not general obligation debt of the town, so it's not exempt from levy limits. So if, and I'm not saying, you may have other ways to make up this shortfall, but, in my view, what would be the worst case scenario that the revenues were short and the town would have to levy a tax to make up the difference. That's what I'm defining as the worst case scenario. If you're a co-signer to a loan and the loan isn't issued in your name, meaning the town's name, as a general obligation debt, and you had to make a shortfall payment, you'd have to absorb that in your operating budget. Versus if the town issues a general obligation note to fund the project, in that same worst case scenario, since it's a debt of the town, a general obligation debt of the town, it's exempt from levy limits. So if there was a shortfall and for some reason the town had to levy a tax to make up the difference, if it's geo debt of the town, you can do that. So that was really the crux of my comments, is just kind of understanding that I get, it all sounds like debt, that's debt, I get that, but legally, that's not how debt is issued. Either the town issues it or somebody else issues it, but you only get the benefit of the exemption from levy limits if the town funds the project. And I should say that my understanding was the town was ultimately going to be responsible for ownership and maintenance of the improvement. Maybe that hasn't been decided. I mean, that's a key consideration as well. So those were my comments. So I don't want those to be taken that you can't go down the path of Visit Rome and the town being a co-signer. I'm not purporting you can't do that. I just want you to understand that that is legally a different type of debt obligation than other debt that the town has outstanding.
So we would not be exempt from the levy limit.
That is
So
correct.
we would, okay.
As a
that
co-signer,
would be-
because you're not the one that really issued
Holding
the
the-
debt, correct. So again, not saying you can't do, I wanna make that very clear. I'm not saying you can't do what was discussed. When Robbie reached out to me, that was kind of my initial comment, just so you understand, that's different than the debt the town is normally used to issuing. It's not the same thing. That's all. I mean, it's.
No, it's helpful. It's helpful. Does the board have any questions for him?
Sorry.
Go, why don't Supervisor Gabriel go first?
I do have a question. Well, I understand your protection of the town. That I totally get, and you always look out for the town first. But when we look at the town co-signing a loan for Visit Rome, it's basically to get Visit Rome a discounted rate, being a municipal loan instead of a not-for-profit loan, okay? So if Visit Rome cannot make those payments, we're going to, 85% of that money comes out of Sand Valley and their hotels and their lodging. So if that money disappears, the TID district is gonna blow apart at the same time. So it's a pretty secure loan if the town does co-sign, being that the revenue that Sand Valley is paying into the lodging, room and lodging tax is really what's going to pay this back. And I think the term of the loan was only like 6 years, the remaining, 5 years? The remaining contract that this town has with Visit Rome, that I think it's just a technical issue on the financing part and less of a risk issue for the town, is my opinion.
I don't disagree, but again, I want to reiterate, the town co-signing on a loan is not the same as the town issuing the debt. That legally is different. I realize that may sound like a distinction without a difference, but.
No, and I understand your side.
There is a difference, and I understand that was the revenue pledge. I was kind of, like I said, I was looking out for kind of the worst case scenario. Because, the town can issue debt on a general obligation basis if the town is the issuer of the debt. A co-signer on a other entity's loan is not a general obligation debt of the town. That's the main thing I'm not here to really argue one way or the other. I want to make sure you're making decisions and understanding all the realities of it.
Questions?
So my question would be, if the town issues the loan, and I think to clarify how much money we're talking here, it was between $300,000 and $500,000, to help with funding the Link the Lakes project with Visit Rome is undertaking using entirely its own resources and donated funds. So would that then, so if the town issues the loan, but Visit Rome is obligated then to pay for the loan, is there an agreement entered between the town and Visit Rome that they will pay that debt over a certain period of time?
Correct.
So it's not giving Visit Rome money, it's just helping to finance a project that is an improvement for the entire town, that this nonprofit has agreed to take on its own and develop.
You
And
can-
then I do understand, sorry, that the town would then be signing an agreement for maintenance, which the amount of that has been estimated but not really confirmed.
Yeah, you can have the exact same arrangement that you've been discussing, where there's, room tax dollars that are pledged to repay the loan. I mean, that doesn't have to change if the town issues the debt. It's just the additional legal protection that the town has if for some reason those room tax dollars aren't available. And I understand that that's likely not going to occur, and I don't disagree with that at all. It's just if for some reason something unforeseen happens, then the town has a little more legal protection on how it can make
I
those debt service.
understand.
That's it.
No, it makes sense, but I just wanna make sure for anyone listening that it's not the town taking out, it's the town helping to make this project happen, and Visit Rome is still totally responsible
Yeah.
for paying off that loan.
All we're talking about is who is the primary issuer of the loan.
Right.
That's really it.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that it's greatly appreciated that the local bank has stepped up to offer the loan. But the only way that they can do it to make it most attractive to Visit Rome is to have it be classified as a municipal loan, which now takes us back in this circle that we're in. So we're just doing the same thing, we're just
Right.
using a different vehicle.
Yeah, you
Is
can
that-
you can do it through the local bank. I mean, everything can be the same. It's just who is the primary issuer of the loan. That's it. Because, the scenario I was trying to address, I'm not saying this would happen, but you're again, get a call a couple years down the road, something happened, the room tax dollars aren't sufficient to, make the loan payment, the town co-signed this loan, can we add it to our levy limit to cover the difference? My answer would be no. So that's really the scenario, as unlikely as that may be, that's the scenario I was trying to think through.
There's always a chance of a catastrophic event,
Sure.
which we
Yeah, I mean,
just see is
your
going on
fundamental,
right
your
now.
fundamental approach can be exactly as you've outlined. It's just, a co-signer relationship is different than the issuer of the debt.
Supervisor Minter, and then I have a question.
I think you might have hinted at the answer to my question, but I'm gonna ask it anyhow, just for clarification purposes. So if we went the GO route, we could still work with the Port Edwards State Bank on that loan?
Correct,
Okay,
correct. Yeah, you don't have to do anything different conceptually. It's just the town is the one securing the loan.
I just didn't wanna look at cutting them out of the loop.
No, neither do I. Neither do I. You can, yeah, this isn't really, we're just talking about some minor distinctions, but they're meaningful if things don't go as intended. And I'm not a doom and gloom person, but it's my job to think these things through.
Well, and I'm not saying we cut them out of the loop either, but we did have to do our due diligence to fully understand what we're getting ourselves involved in here. And as far as interest rates go, are your interest rates competitive across the
Yeah,
markets?
I
We
mean,
don't-
you can, I have no problem with you going to the bank.
Okay.
That's not the issue. It's legally how the loan is structured. It's just, and you can do it either way. I just want you to understand the distinctions between the two.
Any other questions? You're thinking.
I'm getting ready for the motion.
Well,
Say, what's the next
what's the motion
step?
though? I mean, do we know what the borrowing request for Link the Lakes? Oh, yes, ma'am, go ahead, up to the podium, but then I got a question, cause it seems like there's some unknowns here yet.
I have a question. The money that they wanna borrow, is that gonna fund this tunnel?
the Link the Lakes project, yes.
That 300,000 to 500,000 will be enough to do a tunnel?
No.
No.
Lisa, do you wanna, are you willing to talk about that? The funding and the cost
Well,
of the
can I
tunnel?
call on her,
Oh, sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Go ahead.
But
But I don't wanna answer the question.
I know I don't
We
either,
have the
but
answer to the question here.
it
You
would
wanna
be,
hear the
it would
answer?
be helpful, yes, because knowing, cause I have a question then about the TAP grants, knowing that you haven't been able to get two of them that.
Yep.
but Please answer this question
So
first.
the project was estimated to be 1.5 million the first time we had it estimated by an engineer. That would include the tunnel, the mile trail from the west end of the tunnel to the town center, and that would include a bridge over 14 Mile Creek. So that 1.5 was for those three pieces.
What about the acquisition of the land that you need along there? With the homeowners, you have to acquire some land. Is that included in that 1.5?
We know two of the landowners aren't going to, they're going to just give us the land. We still need to work with the other two to see what that would entail. And we're
Do you have a
talking
written
slices of land.
I understand that, but do you have a written commitment from them?
We don't. We've talked to them. Jewel has told us that you cannot enter into a formal agreement until you have approval from the town and your financing in place. He said you can't enter into an easement if this project isn't moving forward.
Okay. But you could still have a letter of commitment from them saying they're gonna give you the land, correct? Cause if we got into this agreement and then somebody suddenly decides we don't wanna sign our easement over,
Sure.
okay. I'm just asking touching
Yeah. No,
due
no, no.
diligence here.
I mean, I guess we won't need the loan if the project doesn't come to fruition. And I guess that could be in your motion or in the agreement. I'm not sure.
And what's the max dollar value that you think you might need to borrow?
We're thinking 500,000.
Max.
And where would you get the rest of it?
Private funding, as well as we have a large capital reserve account of our own.
There's still some unknowns here, I guess, that we don't really know, but I'm,
There are definitely unknowns.
Yeah.
We really can't move forward until we know the financing it will be in place.
and you did say at the last meeting when you presented that you may not borrow this money next year, it could be the following year.
We're hoping to get it out to bid in January.
You're hoping.
Well, if I come to the plan commission in November and it's not approved, that would stall the project. So
I'm just trying to get all the pieces here because we
Yeah,
don't
and
have
I'm
anything in
answering.
writing anywhere regarding the project.
I'm sorry.
We don't have anything before us tonight regarding the project. So I'm just asking the question so I understand. I mean, it's a great idea, it's a wonderful idea, but there are things that the town is gonna be responsible for, so I just wanna make sure we're covering our bases.
Yep.
Which is again, as we stated, why we needed to have our financial advisor help us.
Right.
Does staff have anything that they need to add or wanna add to help us? No?
Well, I'm ready with a motion then. I move that the town of Rome authorize the issuance of a maximum of $500,000 of general obligation bonds working through Nakusa Port Edward State Bank to benefit the Visit Rome Link the Lakes project. Funds to be repaid by room tax revenue from Visit Rome.
And
Do you wanna add any clarifications? There's certain
And-
benchmarks that need to be added?
I don't think so.
if easement doesn't happen,
Well, if they don't get the easement, the project's not going through, they don't need the loan.
right,
So I don't see a reason to add that to the motion. They're only gonna borrow the money if they're putting concrete in the ground.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Supervisor Minter, a second by Supervisor Cole, for borrowing, did you say a maximum?
Maximum 500,000.
Okay. And nothing else? Okay. I'm gonna take a roll call vote on this, starting with Cheryl.
Stevenson, yes.
Minter, yes.
I'm gonna have to state why, but to take the loan out now, we haven't even looked at our loan borrowing yet for the roads. I think it's just
We're at
premature.
15% of our loan limit that we can take. $500,000 would be a drop in the bucket on our maximum amount of loan.
I fully understand that. I got that pointed out to me by Mary in an email as well. I understand.
And this is being paid by Visit Rome.
I understand that.
Okay. Oh.
But there's also future costs that the town will be incurring, the town will own it, the town is gonna have to help maintain it, which means we'll need more staff to maintain it, cause we barely have enough staff now for what we do have. I'm not against this project, I like the idea of this project, I'm just not sure this is the opportune time for us to be doing this. And quite frankly, I have to say no. Jackie?
Cole, yes.
Gabriel, yes.
Alright, motion carries, Lori dissenting.
I will make mention, I think it was alluded to at another meeting that I shouldn't vote on something in regard to Visit Rome because I'm on Visit Rome board. I am the town-appointed supervisor on the Visit Rome board, so there is no conflict of interest me being on the Visit Rome board.
Well, I will also make a statement that I also sit at Visit Rome Board. After I was elected to my first term here as a supervisor, I asked the board of Visit Rome if they wanted me to finish out my term. My term ends this November.
I'll just add that I just, the timing right now, if they're not sure, there's too many unknowns and a few uncertainties, and I understand certain commitments have to be somewhere, but I feel my first and foremost commitment is to the town. And we talk about being able to put things in our park for the community and other things, and I applaud you for the work you're trying to do, but the fact that you got turned down for TAP twice just concerns me as to where the additional funding is gonna come from, but we'll proceed, it motion carries. Thank you, everyone, and good luck with your project. Right. Discussion and possible action. Wake Board Ordinance, announcement of a public hearing for October 17th, 2024 board meeting. Greg, thank you very much for joining us. Have a safe drive home.
Thank you for the info.
I know earlier this summer, we had talked and we had agreed as a board to wait till the legislature would decide something. We know they're not in session right now. Over the summer, I have received numerous phone calls and emails, so I asked that we put this back on here to revisit this. Number of emails and calls about complaints all summer long regarding safety and shoreline erosion. Tried to stay on top of developments in other communities where they have been passing some of these ordinance and have actually been in touch with a supervisor in the town of Dayton regarding their passing of such an ordinance. Granted, one size doesn't fit all, as we know. There's 28 municipalities to date that have passed restrictions on bodies of waters of different sizes and depths. And so, we've been threatened with lawsuits, as have other towns, and they're all realizing, including the town of Dayton and the town of Lake Tomahawk, I believe, that, we're looking at voluntary compliance versus proactive enforcement. And those are things we've all covered so far. I asked that it be on here because as more calls were coming in, maybe other ones here have heard those things as well. And we want to make sure that we hear from everybody before anybody leaves for the winter. Otherwise, signs can't be made, things can't be done in spring before boating season opens. And as we know, people love their lakes and they want to get them in the water as soon as the first piece of ice melts. And I'm being serious. So, I mean, and that's why I asked that we bring this back. I had asked staff about it. And a public meeting, it would be very similar to what the town of Lake Tomahawk, the towns of Dayton and Lynn did, is they brought it to a public hearing, they heard from people, they had a draft ordinance, their next meeting they passed the ordinance. So, does staff have anything they wanna add?
I emailed you guys a proposed language, if you were to do an ordinance. Basically, it's a copy of the two latest ones that were passed. They mirror each other like Tomahawk and the ones over in Wapaka County.
Is it, I have a problem with the boat. I don't have a problem with the sport, I'd say that the ordinance should be against the sport, not against the boat. The sport of surfing. Wake boats have been on our lakes for years, wakeboarding. They ski, they surf, they tube. But if you take away the surfing, which is what they do with the ballast, which make it weight heavy, the boat can still be on the lakes without the extra weight.
Correct, that's what this ordinance
Yeah,
is saying.
just,
Under
you know,
C, it says certain
I didn't
operation-
see your email. I haven't seen it.
Oh, gotcha. Part of the proposed ordinance says C, certain operations are excluded. In no event shall any of the following operations be deemed a violation of this section, provided such operations do not employ ballast tanks, ballast bags, or wake enhancing fins. Number 1, water skiing. Number 2, tubing. Number 3, wakeboarding employing a tow rope. Brief transitional operation to empty a boat bilge of water, or brief transitional operation of a boat accelerating into a planing condition.
So the boats
So
are
the
acceptable, it's the
boats are
sport.
accepted-
It's the sport
acceptable,
with the,
it's
with the weights.
Just enhancing the wake.
And this language is from the two different towns, and there's other ordinances throughout the state that have very similar language. I believe we discussed that we would take it through the attorney that was, Supervisor Cole had been working with, and these ordinances that we looked at for these other towns had already been approved by their DNR representatives. The town of Dayton had theirs approved by their DNR rep in Green Bay.
Have they had any results from any of these ordinances yet?
Yes, and I can tell you what they are.
Okay.
Non-compliance, difficulty to enforce. Same thing we'll be faced with, and threat of lawsuit.
Right.
So, and we know our lakes were built for activities, they know they were built for funds, but I've been getting, and I just wanted, I'm sure other ones have, shore erosion.
I live on the water, I understand.
Oh, I didn't know you were right on the water,
Yep,
I'm sorry.
I'm waterfront.
Okay, so shoreline erosion and safety, but I don't know, can we address anything about any complaints or safety issues we got formally to the town or to the police department this summer?
I haven't received many complaints, but obviously folks have told me that they received them at the board level, so.
Well, do we wanna at least take it to a public hearing and hear from people before they leave for the winter?
Well, there's just open discussion right now. I just think back in May, when this board voted not to discuss it until the state did something. Now, 2.5 months later, we're changing our opinion on it. I am indifferent to whether the ban goes in or not, but we told our citizens our position on this. I mean, I came on the board in April. I believe Minter made a motion in May. We'd have to check the minutes, or, what was it?
It was late June or July,
Okay, June or July.
mid-season.
And then at that same time, we're hearing from the police chief that they can't even enforce what they have now. How are they gonna enforce it? I'm just concerned that we told our citizens what we were gonna do. 2.5 months later, it's back on the agenda. That's my opinion. How the vote falls, it falls. I know I've had letters in my Rome direct supervisor's email box too of people. I know you probably have more than any of us do, Lori. I just don't.
For and against. And the reason I brought it back is because when you're on the prevailing side, you do have a right to bring it back. And I just want to be considerate of those people we were considerate of last winter. Have everybody have a chance to say. And the night that we made that motion, it was the people that threatened to sue us, A, and people in our community seem to think a lawsuit's no big deal. And, B, that, you know, both sides should be heard of at a public meeting. And do we want to do that before people leave for the winter? Because they're gone in January, February, March. Some of you are gone, some of you are working.
I think some of our residents have already left. And before we put this in, if we're gonna have this public meeting, Somebody better tell us what we're willing to spend in court, our citizens, because if we have to take this to court, how much of our tax dollars are we gonna spend on it? And the boat patrol. I mean, honestly, I know we patrol the lakes a little bit on Saturday and Sunday, but we're basically patrolling one lake and then they pull out and go to another lake. This is gonna be an impossible to enforce, because once they see the police boat go out, they'll be back out there doing it again. And I know we don't have a boat on every single lake on Saturday and Sunday in the town of Rome. If we're lucky, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, it's just one police boat out there, correct? And it jumps between lakes, correct?
Generally, unless it's a holiday weekend,
Okay.
there's two.
So, I'm indifferent. You can call for the vote. I just don't know how we enforce it. I think it's gonna come down to people respecting each other, and we all know where that has gone in this day and this world that we live in right now. So, I live on the lake too. My fieldstone, I pick up 5-6 times a year. I understand. I fish on Lake Sherwood. I get just as upset as the next guy when the guy comes by me at 7:46 to do his last wakeboard run, and I gotta brace myself in my fishing boat. But, I mean, we talked about this in June, and now we're again in, what month are we, in October? So that's just my opinion. I'm not against it, I'm not for it. I just think we have to stay our course when we tell our citizens what we're gonna do.
Anybody else?
I have a question, it sounds like you've talked to other municipalities, so when they've enacted the ordinance and the enforcement is a key issue, because they're not gonna stop everybody that's out, but has there been a reduction in the activity just as a result of having the ordinance? I mean, compliance, voluntary compliance, people just do the right thing because they realize their fellow citizens don't want this. So, because we can't expect the police to stop everybody who's doing this.
No, we can.
And the fine is pretty hefty, according to the ordinance. If you do get stopped, the proposed fine is pretty high. So I would just be curious if there is information that it voluntarily people stop wake surfing.
Well, we can refer back to Diamond Lake, but every lake is different. And the one that I spoke to, we spoke to that other gentleman earlier last year, or this year, and the gentleman from the Town of Dayton Board that did this in conjunction with Town of Farmington and Lynn, they had a huge public turnout for it. He said that they're getting voluntary compliance versus proactive enforcement because of the DNR doesn't have enough wardens to enforce it. The sheriff's department doesn't have anybody to enforce it, and they don't have a local police department. So that's who they have to rely on. So what they're banking on is mostly voluntary compliance. They're getting some, but not all. So, we can call other people, but I'm just brought it back before people leave. And technically, if people are part-time citizens here, you can't hold them to their dates, but they're only supposed to be gone 6 months. But anyway, most don't leave till November that I know of, and that's why I was trying to see if we wanted to hear from everybody, because when we made that other motion, we didn't know what they were doing at the state, and it looks like they're gonna continue to possibly put this on us because of the different size. One size does
Right.
not fit all.
And then just one follow-up question. If it is an ordinance, then the town's insurance will cover lawsuit activity that is a result of people suing
We'll have to put
because
that to
of
the
the ordinance?
administrator.
Correct, we do have ordinance insurance.
Is there a cap on that, or exclusions, or anything
I'm not
where?
sure off the top of the head.
how
I
that
believe when we
works?
discussed it before, we called them. Certainly, one of the things you'll be, if you lose in court and they're insuring you, they're gonna tell you remove your ordinance, that they wouldn't cover any future claims.
And we don't know if these other towns that have enacted the ordinance have been sued, because suing is sometimes kind of a bluster. I mean, it's, you know,
Has anybody been sued to date? I know
I don't know.
Dayton's under threat of it, but they haven't seen anything yet.
I don't know.
Or I guess successfully.
Right. Did anybody else have, and I meant you no disrespect by bringing this back, but being on the prevailing side, it's a time management thing. It's as far as signage goes. And
I
boating season
totally-
opens in March if the weather's warm.
I totally get it, I totally understand it. You know, I still have my reservations, much like Supervisor Gabriel, in terms of we're going to potentially put this ordinance in place, and we're gonna have to rely on voluntary compliance. We're not going to be able to realistically do any proactive enforcing of the ordinance. This is basically a total ban on wake surfing on the lakes. I am much more in favor of figuring out, are there portions of these lakes that could have wake surfing on them? You know, maybe not down on the bottom end of Sherwood, down by where I live, where it's so narrow. And obviously not in the channel on Camelot, because you can't make a wake there anyhow now, just to get your boat out of your pier. And then my other question, and I don't know the answer to this because I don't wake surf, I don't have a large boat, is without the ballast tanks, do these boats still generate enough wave to be able to surf behind them? Because if they did, then you could add that into that letter C. But I don't know the answer to that.
I know some pontoons that can. Just saying.
So there are boats that can generate
Can you
without the
elaborate on
ballast
that?
tanks.
Pardon?
Can you elaborate on the pontoon? They're tri-tunes. Is that what you're referring to?
It's if you have a big enough horsepower and you go slow enough and you've got it trimmed up, you certainly can generate a wave big enough to surf behind. Absolutely. Any boat can. And even if you don't add water to it, that's
That's why it's not ban the boat, not ban the it's regulating the activity. There's another one that I did encounter down on Parker Lake in, near Oxford, and that they have no wake now and you're only allowed to operate those boats on certain days of the week.
But isn't Dayton like 115 acres? Their lakes?
Spencer Lake is 70, but this is for the chain.
Yeah, which are all, I've been on the chain
Green
many
Lake
times.
has
It's
theirs.
way too small to even go over wake speed on any of those lakes, so much less surf. But, our lakes are a little bigger than that. I don't see a big problem with it. Yeah, I got some more shoreline work to do, but I gotta do it regardless, so.
Okay.
Is the October 17th date, is that a regular scheduled board meeting?
Yes, it is.
Which could
We can do it a different date.
Well,
I
I
mean,
would-
it
I
doesn't have
would-
to be that day, but you guys are,
I would
you're
rather
all
have it-
working individuals, so.
Yeah, but if it's at 5 o'clock, I can make it. I would just say that I feel that if this vote goes through and it passes, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of talking. And I think that if we have other business to do that night, it gets really long on your fellow members to sit here for 3.5 hours, why we give everybody a minute or two to speak, that maybe we could do this on a
Absolutely, that was
I
just
would
an
be much more
offering.
in favor of not stretching that board meeting out till 8:30 is
Well,
my.
we're just trying to be considerate of everybody's time, because people are working and they're not only available, it's hard enough to get budget meetings scheduled, so.
Yeah, but as long as you keep them to 5 o'clock and stuff, I think me and Cheryl can get here
Well,
for.
and Dan's got
Well,
school.
and I'll speak selfishly. I'm flying back home, leaving Seattle at midnight on the morning of the 17th, getting back into Seaway at 1 in the afternoon. I will be comatose at that board meeting.
That's fine, it doesn't have to be that night, it was just an idea that we think about it before people leave for the winter, and give everybody an opportunity to speak for or against this. We could do it on just one night,
Did you put a survey out like you did for the?
Oh,
the survey.
not again.
Not again. So,
It
some
seems
people
to me that we're back where we started,
Yep.
back in a big circle, and this board needs to take a stand and do nothing or do something. And I think citizens want the board to do something, to go back to allowing the activity in part of the lake, not part of the lake. That just makes it even further more difficult to enforce. I would think, I shouldn't speak for the police department, but I would think that makes it even more difficult, like you either can do it or you can't do it. So I understand, it's a hot issue, we're right back where we started.
But let me just share
So
with you,
I'm like, I don't really have a
I'm sorry.
suggestion, I'm
I'm
like,
sorry, I didn't mean to
either,
interrupt.
like, the old phrase, do it or get off the pot, is where I'm looking at, and I think that's how we ended up with waiting for the state to help us decide.
and now they're not getting off the pot. So
Right, and they're- it
it's
looks
back
like
in
they're
our
not-
laps. It's
so
gonna
it's
stay here.
Right back here.
And I just wanted to add with Parker Lake, they do still, I'd have to double check, but I think they're the ones that still allow some of those activities with restrictions, but only certain days of the week. So it's not to decide on this ordinance
Sure.
tonight. It's
Just to
just
have the
simply if we
hearing.
wanted to have a public hearing and hear from all sides before they leave for the winter. Because they've got signage, they've got enforcement to think about, they've got other things to set up.
And that's good, I understand that. Then we need to have multiple options. I will honestly, the ordinance that you have presented, this draft ordinance here tonight, I will vote against.
Well, I didn't draft
Well,
it.
whoever drafted it, I don't care who
It
drafted
just
it.
came from
it
other
doesn't-
towns. It
okay,
came from
but
other
I
towns
am
and it
not in
passed
favor of this.
successfully.
Now, if we can have options and we have people discuss the options, I might change my mind. I'm not against hearing. We've heard them from in a survey. We've heard them at the meeting where we voted to wait until the state did something. We're always going to have the group that's in favor of wake surfing, the group that's against wake surfing. You're never going to, the two people on, the groups on either end of that spectrum, we're never going to change their minds.
That's right.
They're not going to suddenly flip and decide, oh, yeah, we're okay with it, or okay, we can live without it. They have very strong feelings about it. I have much more ambivalent feelings about it. But yeah, I'm willing to listen to the public, but I just am not in favor of a total ban. That's all.
No, I respect, and let me just clarify, I wasn't passing the buck on who wrote it. This language came from two that had already been vetted by DNR reps, and one through an actual attorney, an environmental attorney. So that's where that language apparently came from. We could allow our administrator to elaborate on it. That's where that language came from. I asked simply if we could put this back on the agenda and have a board discussion about a public hearing, and this is what was brought forward to us in that email.
In Jason's email, he said this was just a starting point. By no way did he imply
Exactly.
this was what
Understand.
We
anybody's
could limit
proposing.
hours, we could limit days of the week, but I think we need to have the public hearing, because that's the other steps these town took. Because like Jackie said, we've gone in a circle now. Now the next step, hey, we heard from everybody about how we needed to set up our transfer site safely. And we were given rules on why we had to do that. So this is one more thing. They wanna be heard, we have to hear from both sides, and then we make a motion to get ready over the winter for the spring and summer voting session.
How about on a week after maybe the 24th, when we don't have a meeting that night, we have we have the,
Is that still a Thursday
So
night?
it is still
I
a
didn't bring my
Thursday?
phone in, so I don't know what
Yeah,
the.
Just remember you have a budget meeting.
Budget
The
meeting.
23rd.
I would say
I know.
before we have a public hearing, I personally don't want to take part in any public hearing with these multiple options that aren't clearly defined.
I
because
agree.
We had that transfer site public hearing, and
That wasn't a
That-
public hearing.
it wasn't a public hearing.
But they turned it
but
into that.
It ended up with that type of feel, like we have these options that are vague and without specifics. I don't want to take part in any public hearing that doesn't have clearly defined options.
And in defense of our
So-
staff, I will say this, they came to us that night needing to give us information to make a
Right.
decision. They didn't even have everything they needed to help us make that decision. They were simply pointing out the fact we needed to react. So I support our staff in what they wanted to do
I
that
wasn't
evening.
criticizing our staff. in
But I
no way.
understand that meeting, it was a town board meeting, and as hard as we tried, some people were very out of line, and it was by design.
Yeah, but we moved past that.
Yes, so now let's move on. That was not a public hearing, but we're talking about a public hearing to hear from people that want to say yes or no to what we do next.
I'd be okay.
Because we can't make up our minds here, and the state's not gonna do it for us.
I'd be okay, just don't want it at a board meeting time too, to really stretch that board meeting. So I would be willing to come the Wednesday. I think you.
Wednesday, we have the 23rd.
And the 24th, I'd be fine there. If,
I'm okay with the 24th. We have 5 Thursdays in November, so we have an extra week in between.
it
board
just,
Well,
I
it wouldn't
could
be an
not
issue if we,
there.
meetings. But on Halloween, but that would be really
So the 24th, I could not be there.
you can't be there, and, well, we should all
I will
really,
not be here on October 17th. I was gonna say that at the next
breath.
breath. But no, I have prior commitments on October 24th. You can proceed without me. I'm not saying you can't have the thing,
But I think it would be important for you to be
I could
involved
not
in
be
the
there.
dialogue.
so.
I can't guarantee you how people are gonna act, but we'll do our best.
Statute on a public hearing and.
You need notice.
How much
Notice.
you have to give. Correct.
So why don't we,
Flanagan?
I would agree, although I would also just, somewhat related to Supervisor Cole's statement. Now I'm hearing, so there's, some of those other municipalities most likely held a public hearing on a proposed ordinance. That's probably how they structured it. But what I'm hearing now is it's not a proposed ordinance. It's a public hearing on something else, maybe a concept of some form of regulation. Just be aware that
you're opening it up.
that ambiguous parts of it is going to probably create more questions and be a more difficult dialogue to have during the public hearing. And so if that's a concern, you probably should be aware of that. The other piece of that is, I think you'll need to be clear with staff what the public hearing is, so we can appropriately notice it. Because
Thank you
it's
for
no
that
longer a
reminder.
public hearing, from what I'm hearing, on a proposed ordinance. It's on the concept of some form of regulation, whatever that might be.
I guess, and that opens it up to what Jackie's saying, and I'm not willing to participate in that either.
So you're
I'd rather
saying-
have something more substance to come forward.
I think you're asking for a chaotic meeting.
Yeah,
So if you have a meeting on a proposed ordinance and it's the one that we have in front of us, or it's a different one, that's something else. It's a hearing, people can see that ordinance in advance, they can study it, read it, have their questions about it, ask the board, and that's that. You're either gonna vote on it, you're gonna have it, or you're not. But if you just open this up again, you're opening that whole can of worms to what hours, what days, where, what place.
Do you need an ordinance of some sort?
We'll get
that's
nowhere.
what they did.
but-
They brought forward an ordinance. So, I mean, if
So if
there's
we're-
certain things you
But
wanna vet
I-
now,
I would assume that if we, so let's say this was the proposed ordinance that came forward to this public hearing, exactly as it's written here. There's nothing to prevent any one of us from proposing an amendment to that ordinance, a change in the language, after listening to the public feedback.
It would seem to me that you already don't approve of the ordinance, and I see Cheryl shaking her head.
No,
She
I
does
would-
not
I would vote no.
already, she would vote no,
well
so.
then it
As
doesn't.
is.
Okay.
So I think
think it
if you're,
pays.
if we're gonna do that as a board, we should hash that out ahead of time before we present the proposed ordinance and have a united ordinance that we are presenting to the public. And if we can't do that as a board, then I say we stay where we're at, because we're the leaders of the, we're supposed to be the leaders, we're supposed to be suggesting what's best for, what we think is best for people. And if we can't do that, then I don't think we have any business having a Wake Bones ordinance hearing if we don't have an ordinance that we're
can agree to.
hearing about, that we can't even agree
But
about.
then you're asking for a predetermined outcome. You don't want to present an ordinance that we're not gonna vote in favor of, irregardless of what anybody out there speaks to that night.
It's not a predetermined outcome. I think what I'm asking for is that we don't already have something that we know fails before it's ever presented. So I think I'm all for the hearing, but I think as a board, we need to continue our dialogue and come up with an ordinance that we want to present. So if you and Cheryl have issues with this draft, then you have an opportunity now to reply to the chairperson with your suggested changes, and we can kind of vet this out before it goes to a public hearing.
Fair enough.
And this was a basis, again, this was just simply something that I had found from the other towns and all these other people that keep emailing me and calling me, and thank you for your input, but look at who passed it now, look who passed it now. So if you go out and you do the research, this is the language that's used on smaller lakes than ours, but I also understand that side. Our lakes were built for recreation, but I also understand that everybody recreates differently. And I agree with Jackie, you know, we couldn't have a town board meeting on operations that the staff was trying to tell us about. So if this ordinance here that's already been vetted by the DNR and an environmental attorney doesn't trip your trigger to change your minds, then we have to come up with something else that we can at least agree to at a public hearing, but we have to have something we stand by to take their input, yes or no. I mean, is my thinking, that's very similar to what they did in Tomahawk, they did in Vilas County, they did in Dayton, Farmington, and Lind, Green Lake. So we're basing it on steps that other people have already taken to get to a successful place of an ordinance. If you don't want an ordinance, then I don't know. I'm just trying to do this, be respectful of people and let them have their say on something that they've been, contacting me about over and over and over. And I got, 45 of them just on compactors that people got misinformation on before I even had my board packet. So I'm just saying.
I think we also need to go back. We did have a survey.
Yes.
And we do have those survey results, and we do have, was 80, am I wrong? It was about close to 80% of our town population voted that we enact an ordinance banning wake boat surfing. Now, some of them might have thought that meant the boat rather than the activity. I agree with Cheryl, it's the activity that we
Not
don't
the
want. So I think we've done that, so we know what the town wants. So now if we start inserting our personal thoughts about this, we're here to represent the town, not our personal thoughts about wake boating. So,
On
for
the
what it's worth.
80% of the population, so you've got all 3,000 some
You're
people?
never gonna get a survey with every person.
Just 80% of the people that responded.
Yes, and it was a large number.
There
We
was
can
900
find
and-
out the total number, but,
About a third. Okay.
It was like 980. We put the results out on the website already. We just didn't put all the comments out there for various reasons, because first of all, it blew up our website, but, so. I would say, and no, I appreciate everybody that came out and talked to us about our transfer site, and they're passionate about that, and I think if that's the route we're gonna take, and I've heard from passionate people all summer long, I'm sure the rest of you have too. It's just trying to make sure that we do something before the winter comes and they start thinking about spring, because it's also budgeting for more enforcement if that's what we need, or sticking with the enforcement we have. But did you have anything you wanted to add, Jason, as the administrator, regarding these ordinances you brought?
I mean, you have to have some kind of ordinance to start this thing, and our lakes are pretty, you can't say you gotta be 400 feet away from shore because they're not that large across, and the DNR is not going to approve making a rule like that where it makes it impossible to do that on the entire.
Because then you're basically outlawing the boat. Because I know Lake Arrowhead's only 254 feet wide at its at its narrowest point.
There's a reason all the attorneys have wrote the exact same. If you go look at these ordinances, they're word for word with a different town's name in it, because you're in muddy water if you change it.
I'm not on the lake. I've never lived on the lake, but at one time we had a pontoon boat. But you did have your hand raised, Lisa. Did you want to come up to the podium and make a comment, please?
Well, it was just in response to Tom's much earlier, he was talking about, well, we put this to vote in April. A lot has happened, or.
The July one where we said we'd let it go to the
Sure.
legislator and wait for them.
I mean, I think there has been so much research and so many towns that have adopted these ordinances that it's worth taking another look, especially with, I think the number was 85% of the people wanted an ordinance in place. So that's all. I just wanted to.
Thank you. Thank you. For anybody else have a comment or want to offer something? I'm looking at the ladies that came back and visited us again. And, all right, and then, all right, come on up, please. Name and address,
I'm
please.
Sherry Sharonsi at 350 Huntington Court, and we do live on Lake Sherwood, and it is very narrow. I don't know if there could be like a no-wake buoy or something that would be closer down by our lake, but some of those wake boats are just too big. And when they come around, we have people kayaking and everything else with their pontoons. I was just out there a couple days ago on my pontoon, and there were some people kayaking, and I was going slow by them when all of a sudden this other pontoon boat comes racing towards me to my side, goes around me, and then goes very fast next to these kayakers. And I thought that was very rude. I don't know if I can do anything as far as a citizen report that this situation happened. I don't know if the police would do anything about that or not.
Yes, they would
but
if you report it the way you're supposed to. They
Okay.
respond to all calls for help.
Okay.
What you would probably normally do, maybe in your police capacity, you could explain that. If you, some people have taken actual pictures of boat license numbers and sent them to them.
Yeah, they would
Okay.
have
Yeah,
the
if you can get a
registration number.
picture of it.
Okay, because I'm not totally against the wake boats, but it's the people driving them, it's the surfing, and we're on a very narrow area on Lake Sherwood. Water skiing would be fine, jet skiing, we see that, no issues. Earlier this past summer, we also saw kids, newer kids in the area, and they were trying to swim across the little narrow area, which was not good because there's people water skiing and you have to be so careful. So,
And
not
somebody
sure
had
where
to-
the parents were, but
Yeah, sorry, sure, I didn't mean to interrupt, but somebody had stated, there was a young man here, very well-spoken, Eagle Scout, that had said that when those boats are up really high like that, they don't see the swimmers or some of the smaller
correct.
personal watercrafts, and not personal watercraft, wrong term, that's their jet skis, right? But
When they fall,
you say-
when they
Right.
fall
I
in the
don't-
water, yeah,
yeah.
they should have their safety flag, but most of them don't have their
Right.
safety flag.
But,
Right.
thank you
So,
very much.
thank you.
Jason, can you please just share with us, some of those things that are mentioned in here? Cause I've seen these boats, I haven't seen some of the bigger ones that I've seen on the road, actually in the water. Some of these things that were described in that ordinance that you gave us, as a sample from the other towns that the DNR has approved and lawyers have approved. Can you tell me, does that take care of some of the transition? And I don't know a lot of those terms. I don't know those crafts that well. I can just watch them in a video and that. But it still says you can use a rope. You could still water ski. You could still surf. Doesn't it say that? I gotta get it back up here. So, we're not outlawing the boat. We're not outlawing this sport. We're just kind of regulating it. Is that correct? If we would
You're
look at
regulating
this
wake
ordinance,
You're regulating wake enhancement. You can't
Wake
operate in a
enhancement.
transitional mode or fill extra weight into your boat to enhance the wake of it.
But if somebody can still wake surf without a rope, it doesn't say in here that that's prohibited, correct?
It doesn't say that for a reason, because you're not allowed by the state to eliminate a sport, and if you say no wake surfing, you'll get challenged, and I'm guessing that's why these attorneys don't have that listed in any of their ordinances.
And then I have a question as for your patrol officers. In the red writing underneath A, no person may use or employ ballast tanks, ballast bags, or fins to cause a boat to operate in a bow high manner. Isn't that gonna be pretty hard to write a ticket for? They're actually gonna have to board the boat, have them lift up the back seat to see what's back there? If it's filled or not filled, I mean, how is an officer gonna write a ticket for a filled ballast tank without actually inspecting that boat?
All of these ordinances, boating, are hard to enforce, and this one's hard to enforce. That's the difference between us and a lot of the other townships. The citizens here, if you pass an ordinance, are gonna demand that it be enforced. We have our own police department, and unless the town board changes the ordinance language and said this is gonna be enforced on a voluntary by signs at the boat landing, I'm gonna have no choice if somebody calls the PD but to dispatch an officer out to deal with the complaint.
and the reason I brought up voluntary compliance versus proactive enforcement is because those other towns are different than us. They don't have their own police department.
And-
They don't have a boat on the water monitoring it.
I mean,
But-
I get it.
I do,
mean, likely the complaints will go from the town board to me if this is passed, because people are gonna call me and say, why didn't the officer do anything about it? And then I'm gonna have to say they were on a car accident here, or they're on a loud noise complaint here. I mean, certainly Saturday and Sunday we can deal with it when the boat patrol is out there, but people are gonna expect us to enforce this at 7 PM on a Wednesday afternoon when the officers are in the car, so
It's,
Some of the enforcement is gonna be challenging.
And we may have to make a statement regarding that, saying that there'll be stricter enforcement on the weekends. That goes back to like Parker Lake. They only allow it on certain days that they know they can enforce it. But just to wrap things up here and get this moving forward, it was, do you like the beginnings of that ordinance? Or can you deal with that ordinance? And you're open for a public hearing? That's really why that was here, before people leave for the winter. I'll leave it at that. Whatever the board's, Jackie, did you have anything you wanted to add or that you can think of? No?
I like the idea of a public hearing before people leave for the winter, but not unless the board is in agreement with what the ordinance is that we're presenting, so that it is a public hearing on an ordinance.
Do we want to take this ordinance and bring that back on to our 17th meeting and add to it, or discuss it more with our administrator, chief of police? He can talk with his staff and then think about a public hearing after that.
but then you're gonna be into November before a
Right.
public hearing, which is, we're gonna hear the backlash. They waited till November to do this when we were all out of town, so.
Well, we're gonna get
Backlash no matter
bashed
what.
anyway. We're gonna, well, we've gotta decide something. We can't keep,
I think a little bit ago, the suggestion was if we wanted to propose any changes to the language, email it to you and email it to the administrator, and then those suggested that could get put out there.
I would prefer you'd mail it to our
I can email it to
administrator.
him.
Yes,
That's
please.
fine. I'll
Email it to the
him.
administrator.
What about the voluntary thing instead of the ordinance? Put up signs and ask people to please respect? No? Kinda like the people sitting at the boat launch,
I mean,
handing out little things to make sure that you clean your boats properly?
it's really the same concept of no wake after 8 PM.
Yeah?
At 8:30, you still have them flying by.
I mean, I get that, but I don't think you have everybody doing that. I think there are the people that will respect the
Yes.
time limitations and abide by them. But it's just, to me, the same thing. We've got laws about what the speed limit is on the highway, and people still speed. You cannot stop everybody that does speed, but most people abide by the posted limits or close to it because they realize it's there and it's a safety factor that you do it. If you think you're gonna have an ordinance and everybody's gonna comply with it, you're wrong. Because we also have now increased density on these lakes. We have short-term rentals on these lakes, and they bring the boats. They don't even know we have an ordinance. They just go and do what they're gonna do. And so if you're looking for 100% compliance or police enforcement, you will never get that. I think all we're doing is making a statement as a community that there is an ordinance about this activity. And so a number of people will say, maybe that's not where I want to do this wake surfing because they don't want it there. They don't want me to be doing it there, and they might stop. I don't know, but so to me, it doesn't hurt to have the ordinance, but if you are looking for a police officer to dash out on the lake because you saw somebody doing it, that is not going to happen. That's also not going to happen when I see somebody speeding down my street. So I can't call Jason and say, oh, somebody just drove by my street way too fast. Can you get over here and stop them? So that whole aspect of it borders on ridiculous to me. So it's pretty much voluntary, and then there will be hopefully the occasional stop. Person gets the fine. That gets kind of contagious. People,
Word gets out.
don't want that ticket. So that's just my take on it.
And that's what I meant by voluntary compliance too. They were saying that the people that are respectful, that own homes there, that have these boats, they might be the ones, they'll comply. It's the ones that come from out of town that could be the bigger offenders that just don't understand or know our rules.
People that already live on the lake with those boats, what are they supposed to do?
They can still use their boat. They
Just
can
not the way
still.
it was designed?
They just can't theoretically, we're not telling them they can't use their boat. Theoretically, we're not telling them they can't wake surf. We're only saying you can't wake surf by filling your ballast containers on your boat or keeping your boat in an upright bow position.
Well, then why isn't wake surfing in the excluded not excluded activities, as long as they don't have, we already banned, we already have the ordinance that'll say no ballast tanks. But why then in C, do we not then put wake surfing without without wake enhancement is allowed?
'Cause you can't do it, I don't think.
I see,
mean, it
I
just
see,
kind of makes it irrelevant.
I see your, because we have wakeboarding
exist then.
employing a tow rope. Wake surfing is still allowed, but it's not filling the ballast tanks. I see Supervisor Minter's area there. Why don't you give us, if you want to schedule, why don't you give us a few days to respond back to Jason, at least to like Monday or Tuesday with any of our ideas? And if you want to pick a date now to do it, by then Jason can update and we'll have an ordinance that we can all look at ahead of time with any changes to it. But I understand the public posting and everything, we're getting to a timeline crunch. I go back to my original statement though, I'd like it not to be on a regular board meeting night because I feel that this discussion is going to,
Be lengthy.
thank you. And it makes for our
Politically
meetings
correct,
to get very
lengthy.
long at night.
Oh, that's
guess
why
just-
people are limited, because everybody will wanna,
Yeah, but limited, if there's 60 here, that still adds a minute a person plus change every time, that's still another hour and a half. Because it's 30 seconds up and back, so I just don't,
all right.
I think I
We
go
could look at a
back,
different
would
day
it
of the week.
help the board if, whatever ordinance is suggested, we have, I mean, you said that attorneys have reviewed this, DNR attorneys have reviewed this.
Not DNR,
Or
DNR reps in
itself,
Green Bay, yeah.
DNR. This goes back to months ago when we were going to actually retain an attorney to review it. Would that help the board at all, or do you not need that? Is that not part of your hesitations
Not part
on
of my
what's been written?
hesitation at all.
That doesn't matter, okay,
no, I would say that doesn't matter to me either.
okay.
All right, so,
A different day of the week then, if the 24th doesn't work for Jackie?
You're gonna find it near impossible to get on my calendar in October, but, I mean, you can throw some out there and I'll.
Why don't you throw what's available, and we'll work
I
with-
think first you
Yeah.
need to
Yes.
know the time, requirements for
15
public
days. You
hearing.
have
15
to
days.
allow 15 days,
Okay.
so we have to have
So
time
if you had the
to,
comments in and
publish it?
had it by the budget meeting, you'd have to set a date, it would be the 25th or later.
which
If you're gonna
budget
go too
meeting,
much
October
later,
10th?
Yeah, if you're gonna go too much later, you're gonna have to wait till the spring because the people are gonna leave.
So October 10th, if we can have our comments to Jason, then we would post it immediately after that, and the soonest we could have it would be 15 days would be,
I think the cutoffs would have to be like Monday or Tuesday so that
if you
we have
wanted
time
the
to
24th.
incorporate them into what we bring back to that meeting on the 10th.
but now Jackie's not here on the 24th. And she should be
It has
part
to
of the,
It has to be published by the 9th, to be on the 24th.
You're not gonna make the 20th.
Not gonna make
Not
it.
to make the
No.
24th.
Said it has to be after the 20th.
How about the 30th?
Can you just say what day of the week that is? I didn't.
Wednesday.
To have the public hearing?
29th, anybody? It's-
What day of the,
I'm open on the 20,
It's a Tuesday.
well, you have a deputy.
Tuesday would be great for me, cause we're closed on that day. So,
28th, 29th,
we're closed on Monday too, either of those days.
29th, I'm available.
28th you are? Okay.
so
28th.
Mondays, so weekend people who really wanted to participate might hang over to do it, I don't know.
And I think primarily we gotta listen to our citizens. I mean, we heard
Right.
from a lot of people that weren't full-time. They're taxpayers, yes, they own property here, but I'd really like to hear from the citizens that live near and around the lake, that are in the Lake District, that were the ones that were crying out for us to do something. And just so Cheryl, I don't know if you knew, but that survey ended up going out town-wide, cause we decided as a board, cause we do all enjoy the lakes, we do all benefit
Absolutely,
from them in different
absolutely.
ways. And they were gonna limit it originally just to the Lake District people, and we agreed to let it
I
go to
remember everybody
every.
got in there, yep.
Thank you.
Are we on the 29th then? Is that, is it
28.
Well, this is if we have an ordinance ready to present.
the
correct.
28th is a Monday?
Has to be published by the 14th.
Okay.
So it's not something, yeah, we wouldn't notice it yet, okay.
Well, if we would have it published by the 14th, we could discuss it again on the 17th and make sure that we're all behind it, and that could still,
No, because again, you're setting the public hearing on an ordinance, and so you need to,
have the ordinance firm and I got it. Yes, sorry.
The 10th, we need to, the 10th on that budget meeting, we need to.
That'll be the night.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So,
I'm good with the 28th, but could it be 5:30 or later? Because I have a curriculum committee meeting from 4 to 5.
Oh, now we're on the 28th?
Monday
For
the
the public.
28th.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the 29th.
But we just said that the weekenders might stay a
Okay,
day.
28th is fine.
The 28th,
At 5:30
Pushes the
PM.
dates back
Yeah,
one
that
day.
pushes us back a date though, so then, is the 10th still gonna give us enough time for our posting?
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
That has to be posted by the
You sure you're gonna
14th.
be in town?
So,
I gotta leave town after that.
No, it's not, because
Nope,
legal
that wouldn't
notice
be
would
enough
have to go
time.
in on the 10th.
so then we gotta make it,
I'm not familiar with what the Tribune's time is. I know they have increased their window
A
now.
little bit, yes, but it would still have to be in by the 10th in the morning.
well, Jason, do you have some ideas about once we decide on what,
I don't know how much, what's the ideas to add to the ordinance, I mean,
I really have none, because I can see them, I know how they operate, I've heard the complaints, I don't know.
I've looked at tons of these and attended a school, I mean, your other things that they add to them is they say 500 feet from shore, well, our lakes aren't like the size of Lake Tomahawk up north where you can say 500 feet from shore, if you say that here, you're gonna have an illegal ordinance because it's
You're
basically
outlawing
gonna
the boat.
outright prohibit it. Which the attorneys have said not to do. I mean, there's groups that write these ordinances that have pooled money together, that's why they're word for word the same, because they had some attorney that says he thinks he can defend this, so they all enacted the same ordinance, and if you start going outside of that scope,
That's where you open yourself up, isn't it then?
problems are coming in. We discussed the last time we did this, we've kinda gone around the clock that if you say you only can do it from 10 to 2 on Wednesday,
Yeah, we did.
that creates a nightmare. If you say that on Saturday, that's the worst time to encourage people to do it, cause it's when the lakes are busiest, so what kind of restrictions are you looking to add to this ordinance or change in it? There isn't that many things we can do, that some of them are depth, they say you can't do it if it's less than 30 feet of water, well, that limits it to a 200-foot radius out in front of the dams on these lakes if you need 30 feet of water, cause they're not 30 feet deep in many places.
Yeah, right in front of one person's house.
I would definitely, would like B, the prohibited operations just removed. Prohibited equipment is one thing. Just take the equipment out. But we leave that in, I mean, say no equipment, they can't have it.
If we did the 30th, does that give us, if we do something on the 10th? The 30th would be the best. Can everybody do 5 o'clock on the 30th?
No,
All right, can you do 5 o'clock on the 29th?
yes.
Then we have to know exactly, and like Jason said, how much of this will change. But, if we did it on the 29th, but then that's the weekend, so somebody call it, all right, so we can end this meeting and go home.
Seems everybody could do the 29th. I mean, it's
29th is fine.
It's fine with me.
All right,
Are we staying at 5:30 then? Or 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
Fi- was 5 o'clock okay for you on that Tuesday, Supervisor
Tuesday, 5 is
Minter?
fine.
All right,
So it's Tuesday the 29th.
and then on the 10th, we have to have our language firmed up so it can go to posting. And our clerk is telling us that that does give us, we're borderline.
Close.
Yeah,
We're just taking out B, that doesn't take much to cross.
Maybe set an internal cutoff of the 7th to get any feedback
Okay.
to
okay.
the administrator. That would give some lead-in to get a proposal, in front of you on the 10th. I think that would give enough time to do
And
that.
please send it to Jason, include Robbie in case he should get sick or something, so she's aware. Carbon copier.
So
You would?
feedback the 7th, review on the 10th.
Yes. so any feedback would be by the end of the day on the 7th.
Okay. That sounds good, okay. Alrighty then, do we
And
need a
just so we're
motion?
clear, we're asking for board feedback, not the public to submit.
That's
their
correct.
feedback.
Cause that's what the public hearing is for.
Exactly, but I'm just making that
No, and I
clear
appreciate
so
you did.
people aren't confused and all of a sudden you're flooded and it just complicates this, cause a public hearing is for that purpose.
This is for our purpose, yes, to get ourselves on the same page and move forward to them. Alrighty, so everybody has their marching orders, do we need a motion for anything then?
You do not.
Attorney
because
Flanagan,
it'll
okay,
be on the next agenda, so you can actually just discuss it at the next agenda.
alright. Alrighty then, thank you everyone for that discussion. Dates and items for future agenda meetings, next agenda items, so we have our marching orders, October 7th, town board member comments to staff, so they can work on it, bring it to us on October 10th for our budget meeting, which is also at 5, out of respect for those that are still gainfully employed, not retired. And then the next one is October, 17th, I think we have a meeting, which is our regular town board meeting at 5 PM. All right, any other items that anybody wants to bring up at this time? Otherwise, get them to Jason and the clerk, and they'll get them to me.
Do
And
you, do you have a date for the next budget meeting after the 10th? Isn't there one more? Is that
23rd.
23rd.
October
Did I say 24th?
23rd at 5 o'clock.
23rd.
23rd
At 5 PM.
at 5 PM? And then we have this now at the 29th at 5 PM.
I will not be here on October 17th,
Okay,
just so that's
no
not a
Jackie.
surprise.
Alrighty, thank you for that. All right, next meeting date and time then is October 10th at 5 PM.
That's a budget meeting.
That's
Yeah, a budget meeting. So, someone make a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Cole, second by Supervisor Gabriel to adjourn the meeting at 7:17. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.